This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Free agency, trades, the offseason has hit us, and it has been a interesting ride so far. The Browns recently made a trade for Elijah Moore. They also signed Dalvin Thompson. Like, it seems like Dalvin Thompson was signed like years ago. That happened like a week ago. But to help dissect and talk about all this, I'm bringing on one of my favorite guests, Jake Burns. Jake, how have you been feeling about the Browns free agency so far?
Well, I'm tired because I do so many of these guys. I do so much film on all of them that it's tedious and long, but fun, man, fun. I think they have done, and I know you and I were talking about it a little bit leading up to this. They're in a very delicate situation, as you well understand, and I'm sure your viewers do, with, they don't have a ton of cap. They have ways to create cap, but they don't have a ton of it. So with that sort of impingement on their ability to go out and go get talent at the top end of the NFL's free agency, they have to be very smart about a lot of the moves they make, right? And it's going to get tighter as the years come and go here. But what I think they did a really nice job of in a nice 2-year, 3-year window here is bringing in talent that fit for their specific needs while being mindful of money. And I think that, like, if I were to map out Quincy, like, including the Elijah Moore trade into their free agency, because it all is intertwined here, it is as good a job, I think, as we could have hoped from a fan's perspective of not overspending, but spending decent amounts of money on players that fit needs that they really need to fix. And we can get a bit more granular, I'm sure we will. But I'm just, from my perspective, watching a lot of the film of these guys, what draws, because this is what the Browns are doing inside their building, is they're watching film of free agents and trade targets and saying, how do they fit into what we do? You can see the path for all of these guys. And I think they did a good job of balancing age ranges here of guys that still have really good football in front of them. And like I said, the spending of it wasn't reckless. Even the trade that we'll discuss, and I did on my pod too, was cultivated in a way that was like the peak end of what you could get, Quincy, in terms of contract value for a player, performance of a player, and potential uptick in production of a player. Like, it just doesn't get any better. And they have to be creative because of the situation they're in with the quarterback contract and others like Miles and Denzel and so on and so forth. But I just really think if you're a supporter of the Browns and you're trying to see the light here, like, I'm here to tell you, I don't know that it's going to work out. I don't know that they're going to win double-digit games. I'm never going to tell you that. But I certainly have enjoyed their plan. And I think a lot of neutral NFL minds who have no reason to slant things in the Browns' favor have also enjoyed their plan. So it's been really well done so far by Andrew Berry.
Yeah, it's been interesting, right? Because I thought this was the offseason where they would have to just start signing guys over 30 because it seemed like that would be where you would get some of your value. But it seems like in the absence of a ton of cap space, right? And fans generally want you to take the short thing, right? Whenever we're talking about it, and the short thing in free agency, that's expensive, right? That's Daron Payne, that's Javon Hargrave. These are guys who have proven track records of being really good players. They're going to be very expensive. Then there are educated guesses, well, not guesses, but educated bets, where it's like, okay, I like what Agbo did at the end of his run when he got some starting time. I think if we put him next to Miles and we get some help next to him, that'd be helpful, right? Jordan Atkins, you like what he did with Deshaun Watson, had 5 touchdowns last year, young guy, good receiving tight end, not necessarily much of a blocker, but you think that there's some upside there. Elijah Moore, obvious upside there, former second pick in the second round too, so almost a first round pick there. Somebody who has explosive off the charts athleticism, similar to Tyler Lockett and Brandon Cooks in his RAS score. And then you have Dalvin Tomlinson, who's probably the closest thing to a short thing that you got here, and that's the most money that you spent. So it's like when you, in the absence of money, you got to take some bets. Right. And you'll see teams do this all the time. Kansas City does this all the time, where they take bets on younger players. Juan Thornhill also, I can't believe I almost forgot him. Another younger player who's closer to a short thing because he's been a starter for a little while, but also young, could develop into more, could be the same. There's a good bet there. So it's just a different approach to free agency than what you can do when you have tons of money and no responsibility. This is an adult free agency for the Cleveland Browns. It might be their first adult free agency.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like they're giving you your first taste of, we don't have a ton of money, but we can still make moves. Like last year, the Browns were not players in free agency at all, but they made a really great wide receiver trade. I'm sure that you and I would agree on that. So that was an example of, we don't have any money, but we do feel like we can still do some things. This year, they've created angles for money, but they have not been reckless in that money, right? They've done a really nice job of putting together a plan. And not to say they weren't chasing Javon Hargrave and Draymond Jones at the top of the DT group. We know they were, but I think that the outcome of what you have here is really a smart spending group that did a nice job of still attacking players that I think are really talented, man. I really do. And I, every time I write these guys up or discuss them on my own show, like I'm always, as you know, hesitant to put on the orange and brown goggles and fan them up and pump you up and try to sell you something that's not real. I try to highlight what they struggle with, but it's easy to see how these guys were wagers that the Browns were very willing to place, because the skill sets that they bring, which again we'll get into in a bit, are all very easily parts of the Browns structure that they're missing, and I think can really help them take next steps to where they want to go.
Yeah, I think having a quarterback contract is like the NFL equivalent of having a child when it comes to like the impact that it has on your spending. Because before you have that quarterback contract, you can do whatever, trade for whatever
it changes
contract.
Everything.
Yeah,
that's what
and it changes. It changes your responsibilities. it elevates your ability to be mature and all that, but it also, you know, comes with some financial difficulties there, where it's like you have to learn how to adjust around it. And the Browns, they have had their first child. Because the Deshaun Watson contract is something they have to work around, right? And the Miles contract, right? Miles is not cheap either. No, but
Miles is probably the firstborn. Your secondborn is Deshaun, and then you probably like adopted a couple kids, right, with Denzel, and you adopted Nick Chubb, right? That's kind of I think we nailed it, Quincy. That's right.
Yep, that's the cost of having good players. They're not cheap. So we talked about some of the guys they traded for. I think Elijah Moore is going to be top on everybody's mind because that literally just happened yesterday. I know you're very high on Elijah Moore. What is it about his game that you liked about him coming out of Ole Miss? And what about that game has you seen transfer in his limited tape so far in the NFL?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm going through this morning is I pull all the clips I want to pull, and then I sort them, and you know how it is, man. You work with YouTube. I'm putting everything on YouTube and trying to upload it and all that, and it's a tedious process, but what you do is you get a feel for them. So you illuminated something a couple minutes ago that is really very fair to point out, the RAS score stuff, which is phenomenal. The only part of that relative athletic score that was not on the positive side is something that God gave him, right? It's his height and his weight. It's 5'9.5", 178. So that is really, if you go back and look at the 21 draft, I mean, that's a stack. The last two draft classes stacked wide receiver. 21, it was, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith were all up at the top of the group. And then he was in that second tier, which I thought he could have very easily been swapped out with Kadarius Toney, who was taken 20th by the Giants. Now we've seen where Toney is a little bit of a similar situation where he's like in Kansas City now, where he flashed a bunch of potential, but he couldn't quite get the head on straight, couldn't quite get him rolling in the Giants structure, which is a little harder for me to understand because the Giants had nowhere near the amount of wide receiver talent that we think that I believe the Jets have now in 2022. But nonetheless, a similar state. And then Rashad Bateman was in that group too. He went the pick after the Browns at 27. So you pointed it out well. He's picked the second pick in the second round. I know a lot of teams were calling the Jets to try to come up, move, and get him. And what you like about him is every other part of the athleticism mark, right? He's got good vertical jump, good broad jump, all of those in the good range. Not elite jumper, but you can certainly see that he has enough explosion. The speed is great. 20-yard split shows up on his tape when he's really driving DBs off the football and then making that sharp cut. And the agility grade is elite. People love this year's class. If I'm trying to relate it to what you're thinking about most recently, Jackson Smith and Jigba's shuttle and three cone, that he's right there. He's right there with the Julian Edelmans, the Cooper Kupps. He is a stop-start, and as I watch tape, he is a guy who threatens defensive backs to turn. And if you know anything about wide receiver DB play, if you're going to be good at it as a wide receiver, you got to make DBs turn their hips. If you let them stay square in a long time because they don't fear you running by them, they can defend a lot of route concepts. But if you get those guys to turn their hips to run upfield, oh boy, you got everything at your belt. And he can do it. He does it pretty consistently on tape. So those agility scores and his stop-start, like he is not quite as gifted a natural nuanced route runner as Amari Cooper, but I love the fact that Amari is going to be able to help him with that a little bit, but he does a lot of innate things really well. His abilities to not only make DBs turn their hips, but then once they do, he can find what's called the blind spot and make DBs just like, where did he go? He'll disappear on him, and that's where you get the separation. That's the hardest thing. You can have all these athletic grades in the world, but if you can't figure out the little nuance of like, how do I get into the DB's blind spot? What do I got to do to turn his hips? It's a subtle lean. It's a 1-2 plant type of thing. He knows that stuff. Now, Amari's going to help him. I would imagine he will just soak this stuff up on the release package stuff, right? Amari's got the drag. He's got that fire feet release. He's got the double in and out stuff. He's as good as it gets.
Amari Cooper is 100% like your favorite wide receiver's favorite wide receiver.
Yes, he 100% is. He's like the Allen Iverson, right?
Yeah.
Where players in the league are like, that's my favorite player. So he is going to help him, I think, a ton. But what he does in the route, I think Elijah's pretty gifted. Now, he's also got more wiggle than he's given credit for. I think he can make guys miss. And I certainly think if you go watch the tape and you look at the stats, he doesn't drop the football. He catches the football low. He's not a wide, high catch radius guy because he's not very big, but he can go get it if it's above him, and there are some examples of it. So from what he does well, he's a really good route runner, man, and I think he can continue to get better with release stuff. And we'll talk about why the Jets would end up feeling like they should trade him and what could stop him from being any kind of good. There's some stuff there that there's still, there's risk involved here. But when I watch it and the Jets offense, which Mike LaFleur, I don't know what the guy's trying to do. It's a mixture of LaFleur using him in the weirdest ways because he's trying to fit in Corey Davis, who's given a lot of money. Got to still try to get him the ball. You got Garrett Wilson, who I write soliloquies to Garrett Wilson. That guy's phenomenal. So I understand that pursuit. And they still had Denzel Mims. So there's a lot of stuff to go around there. And they used him in a way that I didn't think Elijah in a way that was conducive to who he can be. They're using him as like a slot jet motion fly sweep guy a lot of times. And like, this guy is an outside Z receiver who can continually crush people with two-way goes to the sideline, back inside in the curl stuff. He is really good at it. So I would have to imagine the Browns were all in on that angle of it, and that's where they think they're going to see him thrive the most. So just to me, classic. I mean, LaFleur was fired. The quarterbacks were terrible. They're going after Aaron Rodgers over there. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett, and they think it's going to get better. So I'm not trying to dog on these coaches in New York, but when I watch it, I'm like, this guy is way too good to be doing this role that they've given him here. And it's I could see why Elijah Moore is like, I need to get out of here. I cannot. This is not good for me. So I'm really excited to see him come to Cleveland and what they do with him. And I hope they can see that he is an outside receiver that's best at that, very effective, and you can put Amari inside and let him do some stuff from the slot. You can put Donovan in to be a big slot who can block. He's a really effective blocker inside the tackle box when you need him to be, but he can also break tendency and do some routes inside. So I hope they get creative, but they have a guy in Moore here who I would say is like a Brandon Cooks. Like if he gets the the target share, the time I think he deserves in the right role. He is a version of Brandon Cooks that I think could be even better if given the right opportunity here.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I wonder about with Elijah Moore, and I just don't think you got a lot of real good reps in there when he was in New York, was his ability out of structure. What do you think he's going to be able to do when Deshaun breaks the pocket? Because that's one of the things with the wide receiver room we just did not have last year, was good out of structure play from the wide receiver group. Do you think that's going to be something that can improve?
Well, yeah, I think he's fine. I mean, to your point, which you stated there in your lead up to the question, is he didn't. He just didn't. These guys, I mean, Flacco's a statue. Zach Wilson is a panic machine. You got a little of it with Mike White, where he would get out on occasion, but not much. So It's hard to sit here and feel concrete about it. But I was just watching a 4th and 18. He made a great double move up the right sideline. Quarterback got outside the pocket to the right. He does a great job of working away from the DB back toward the middle of the field, catches it, and gets 20 yards on a long out of structure play. So he can do it. I think he's got great spatial awareness when he's near the sideline, where he needs to go. Do I need to turn up? What point do I need to throttle it down on the sideline? I've seen it. It's on tape. So there's no reason to think he's not gifted enough from the mental side of it to understand where his quarterback is and how I need to move and all that. But it'll be, OTAs will be huge. And, mini camp, training camp, all that stuff will be really big for these guys to get on the same page. But he is certainly a guy that can do it. And I there's no reason for me to think like I'm watching tape and I see, well, he just doesn't realize the sidelines there. He doesn't realize where his quarterback is. He's got a good feel for this stuff. So I think he'll fit in just fine.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, because if that works out with him and Deshaun's ability, that could be something special there. That they could get, if they can get that working. Now let's talk about real quick. Let's talk about Jordan Atkins. Actually, he's a interesting guy, tight end prospect. It's kind of, it's not a flyer because he's definitely making a team. He's kind of in there to take that tight end 2 spot. What role do you see him here in Cleveland? And do you think he's going to be somebody who's going to be a consistent contributor through the air, or you think he's going to be more or less a guy that might be active on game days?
He'll be active. He should be. I would imagine he is. I think the one that you question here because of that contract they gave him is what they want to do with Harrison Bryant. Now, I'd imagine they dress 3. I hope that there's a massive downtick in how much 13 personnel they use. Like, I think Atkins is a better athletic tight end, and he's certainly proven he can catch the football down the seams. He's got plenty of experience doing that. It seems like a relatively okay blocker. I need to dig into his tape a little bit more, but I feel like they like him as a nice complementary to David, and especially because David can miss some games here and there. They wanted some more of that. They obviously went into last year a lot of times with only 2 tight ends. We're playing that extra offensive lineman. So I think there's a lot to like. I certainly think he's going to be active. He's going to be a part of their 12 personnel. It's a dogfight between him and Bryant to see who really is their second tight end. I think if they use a wing tight end, more of that F role, he'll be involved there. If they want to get a tight end into the backfield to do a bit more lead blocking and some of those split zone type things more often, then you probably see Harrison Bryant do it. He's a bit more physical and they like to block him. So that's my hunch. But I really like the signing, man. Cheap-ish sort of contract, what you want to pay your second tight end. And he's got obviously the experience with Deshaun matters, and a lot of the wrinkles to scheme that they want to put in, he was heavily involved with in 2020. So he'll be naturally understanding of what those things are that they want to do with Deshaun. So I think he's really just a guy. I mean, he's a nice secondary tight end, but that experience and obviously the trust with the quarterback and his ability to go get the football a little bit more than Bryant can, you feel a bit more confident in that. So I think you can sort of see where that's trending. But Harrison will still be involved. He might have some games where he doesn't play many snaps, but I would imagine just the nature of tight end and how physical it is, he'll get some snaps out of necessity here and there. But I think it's certainly Atkins, am I saying it wrong? Atkins? I think it's Atkins who is the leader in the clubhouse to be the second guy in 12 personnel.
Definitely. All right, let's switch to the defensive side of the ball. Dalvin Tomlinson was signed from Minnesota. He's been somebody I've been having my eye on since he was his last year in New York. I thought he was really good that year. Mm-hmm. What do you think of Dalvin Tomlinson? Like, given what the Browns' issues were at defensive tackle, which there were a number of them, right? Yeah. What do you feel like he shores up the most of that bucket of problems that they had pop up last year?
Well, he's a run defender by nature. You would agree with that. Like breaking him down, he was best in his early parts of his career. New York powerful nose tackle who could really sort of anchor down blocks. He's such an effective shock. We used to call linebackers sort of shock and shed, but he is an extension lock into the chest of a lineman, and then he can get rid of them. He's still that. He's still a really effective run player. Now he's played a bit more three technique, wider, sometimes into the 4-eye because Minnesota and New York were odd front teams. I'm interested to see what the consistency of this thing looks like for him, where he's playing an even front team like the Browns. Is he going to be a bit more of their shade one tech, or is he going to be their three? I think in an ideal world, he's a plus side pass rushing shade that can really anchor the interior of A gap to A gap run game, right? And then obviously push off, mess up, pulling guards, all that stuff, just throw off timing. So what I would say is he's gotten came into the league, not a great athlete. If you go look at, that's why he kind of fell to 55. The production was good at Alabama and the tape was good, but the athletic stuff bit limited, right? So that's where I think teams are like, okay, he's probably a second rounder, and that's why he goes pick 55. But he's proven to be strong enough to rely on the strength part of it, right? So if we talked about the speed stuff, or sorry, the power stuff, how he's a really good long arm guy, locking into the chest. He'll take that off arm, lock into the chest, and shed people. That's his most effective run game work. You don't see him win with a ton of flashes of speed against the run game, but he can make people miss. He's surprisingly spry for his size, right? So I think he's done a nice job as he's gotten older, adding some of those things. As far as pass rush, he's a bull rush first guy. Any of those big fellas are bull rush guys. They try to lock their arms into you and run through you, and he can do that. He'll bury pockets. He's gotten better at adding to that. I think what I've noticed over the time of his 2 years in Minnesota is he's added a couple different pass rush moves. So he's added this this push. He'll get up underneath the shoulder pads, the chest plate, and he'll pull you, push, pull, and then swim. He loves a swim move, so he'll take that off arm, swipe over the top. And what he likes to do then is try to, as much as a man of his size can, get skinny and create an angle to get past. So that's been a nice addition for him. He's added that, and then he's added a little club rip to his pass rush plan, and I think he's seen more consistent results from that. So you're talking about, again, if you go back and look at the stats, upwards of 30 pressures last year. I think obviously he's going to help in the run game where the Browns are historically bad, but people don't talk about it enough. They got next to nothing out of their interior pass rush on top of that. And I think he can help there. He won't be great. There'll be some games where he won't, he'll just be absorbed. They'll double team him and he won't be a big part of the pass rush, but there'll be a lot of times where I think he should be a 35 pressure guy. The Vikings took him off the field a lot when they would go with their speed package. I think the Browns would be inclined to keep him on the field as, like, if they go that sort of mug front, capped front, whatever you want to call it, where they bring in a dime backer and they're really going like with a dime look and they're getting creative with blitz stuff, putting him at nose and letting him just run through the space of a center and those speed packages, I think could be really effective for him. And he could also provide a little bit of a security against, draw concepts and stuff like that. So I think he's a good signing. He's not great. He probably is never going to be an all-pro, but he could be a Pro Bowler here. He could anchor this and bring a level of professionalism to that position that really needs it. I think we would all agree they need to add another player still to that defensive tackle group before the draft. But nonetheless, he is he's just a pro, man. He's a really good pro. And I hope that production for him as he gets a few more snaps here in Cleveland leads to a bit of a Pro Bowl recognition thing for him.
Another guy that they signed who's kind of on that same deal where it's like, hey, we see some upside, is Agbo Okoronkwo from Houston. He was also in LA. What do you see from his game? What have you seen flash in his game that has showed some potential? What concerns you about him?
He's got an interesting story, man. So he comes in out of Oklahoma, and to give you a frame of reference on a guy you feel like is a little younger than he was on that team Baker was when they played Georgia. So he came in that same year, a bit of a tweener. That's why he doesn't go until I think he was pick 150 or right around pick 150. He was a later pick, and again, a bit of a tweener. Didn't know what he fit in. He goes to the Rams. Rams are a bit of a unique defense. I think we could all agree on that. They're an odd front team. So he comes in the first year. He has a knee injury, so he doesn't play at all in 2018. His 2019 season, he starts the year on the pup list. Eventually gets a chance to crack into the lineup. 2020, has a bit more of a role, starts to increase a little bit, but deals with some nagging injuries. 21, he starts to take off, but if you recall in 21, the Rams had Leonard Floyd, and then they brought in Von Miller, right, for their Super Bowl run. So he never really got the opportunity to flourish, and I think that they wanted more out of him as an outside linebacker that he just wasn't able to give them in that situation. So he leaves LA as he's slowly getting better at understanding how to rush the passer, and he goes to Houston to play in Lovie Smith's cover 2 base. It's a 4-3 look, cover 2 base. It's unique, old school stuff. And he really figures it out mid-season. You could see the light bulb come on as a 4-3 edge where he is like, okay, I got this inside swim move. I can win upfield with speed. So tackles are oversetting. I can hit him with a little double plan or a Euro move that he'll add to it. He started to add, man, like he's put together a swim move on top of it. And he's getting so comfortable. I saw him add that ghost move, that Von Miller ghost move, which is a really unique way of like selling upfield and then acting like you're going to run that. If I'm rushing off the left tackle or the right side of the defense, you try to put your hand up in their chest and long arm them. Well, you do that, you flash it. The tackle's going to go to punch, and you just sort of dip. I'm doing a terrible job on camera of this, but you try to dip up under him. It's called a ghost move, where you act like you're going to put your hands on him, but you don't. He was like showing refined pass rush stuff. And if you look at his stats week 7 through the end of the year, he was among the most effective on a snap by snap basis of getting pressure on the quarterback. And like, again, I'm trying not to paint too crazy a picture here, but if he had 517 snaps last year and had 35 pressures, I think. If he gets 400 pass rush snaps, plays maybe 650, 700 total snaps, which is what Clowney played last year, he's a 45, 50 pressure guy. And from that many pressures, if things go in your direction, you can get upwards of 10 sacks. And I think he's got that ability. I really think he has hit his stride as a pass rusher where he feels so comfortable now. He knows the ways in which he can win pretty consistently. And that inside swim move that he has is so deadly that I think it's going to give some teams fits, and I think he's going to be really good here. And he's not as good against the run, but he can set the edge. He can hold it. He can anchor against teams trying to push the football laterally. He doesn't quite get back inside as quick as I would like, but he takes care of his job well, right? And that's the primary, right? We want people to be able to take care of their job and then disengage and get back inside or bump outside to make a tackle. He's not perfect at that, but I do think he's good enough rundown player that he can play. He's not going to be a liability out there in the run game. So I think he's a guy that they really think, as he's turning 28 this year, they signed him to a 3-year deal, and the Browns did the rare thing of giving him 2 option bonuses, which is something they don't do all that often. It gives him the ability to kick the tires on his cap hit. They did it in Myles Garrett's contract, but they don't do it very often. What it means more or less is if you pay attention to how the Browns structure contracts, most of the structuring they use is built around an early out. They're not giving him an early out in this contract. He's here for 3 years. He's going to play all 3 years in Cleveland, and that tells you what they think of him and where they think he's going as a football player. And I agree. I watched the tape. I'm like, good Lord. Like I see everywhere this is going for him, how comfortable the change from his early Rams years to that end of the year last year with the Texans. It's pretty easy for me to see the type of player he could be. And the fair question is, well, why would the Texans let him go? And why would he not sign for big money? Well, he hasn't played a ton of snaps yet. He hasn't proven he can play a ton of snaps. So you're always risking that, right? Can he handle an increased workload? The Texans are in a rebuild. They don't want to spend money on certain positions yet. They're trying to figure out, are they going to draft? Who are they going to draft? What are they going to surround him with? The Texans were still in, but they didn't want to keep paying past a certain point. And the Browns, I think, are saying, okay, we'll pay you a bit more because we believe you're going to this place. And I think for Okoronkwo, his thought process had to be, I feel like, obviously feel like I'm going to have some stellar years here, but I want to lock up some money while I can, because you never know, the NFL, Quincy, you never know. I mean, a guy could get injured in one single training camp play. So you take what you can get while you can get it. But I really feel optimistic about where that young man is going, because the tape and like the stats that back up the tape that I was seeing from his Texans run there the last half of the year was just stellar stuff.
Well, I think with Okoronkwo, I think one of the things that he was thinking about in this free agency decision is like, what opportunity is going to be best for me too. So if it's equal money from Houston, where there's no Myles Garrett on the other side, and in Cleveland where there is Myles, because we know that by virtue of Myles just being Myles Garrett, wearing that 95 jersey, he's going to get phantom pressures just because the quarterback's thinking in the back of his head, Myles is coming. I'm going to have to flush to the other side. He's probably going to get a couple easy cleanup sacks just because of that. That happens every year with somebody where they just get some easy cleanup sacks. It's hilarious that Clowney was like complaining about that. That was one of his complaints about the team. It's like you benefit from your best season, like since JJ. But it was just a whole interesting situation there with Clowney. We'll see where he ends up next. But yeah, I think the needle's pointing up on him. It'd be interesting to see how high that needle goes. But it certainly is pointing up with him. Now, Juan Thornhill is another guy, young player, just out of his rookie deal. I was surprised that they were able to get him at the number that they were able to get him at. I mean, like, this is first run free agent guy, first team. Usually for $7 million for a safety, you're getting somebody who's on like their second or third, well, it's third team, you know. What do you think of the signing? What do you think of Juan Thornhill as a safety?
I get confused because I don't know what teams are craving. Like the Jesse Bates at 16 million and Juan Thornhill at 7. I've got to be honest, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I think that teams could be more interested, like more of the physicality that Bates brings, and Bates they might feel like has a bit more positional flex. But I mean, as far as playing in the back half, and what the Browns really need more than anything else is the ability to have a guy who can play split coverage and single high coverage, and he can do that. So, like, to me, what's interesting about him is those parts of the game are what he's best at. That's what he's done in KC between playing with Tyrann Mathieu and playing with Justin Reed, two other good safeties. He's comfortable playing split. He's comfortable playing deep. Now, he doesn't have a ton of stop tackles. Those plays that constitute failures usually close to the line of scrimmage because he doesn't play up there. That's not what the Browns need. They have a guy in Grant Delpit who can do it. But if you watch Thornhill's tape, he can do it. He can walk down and play man coverage against a slot with relative success. He can play tight ends. He can come off the edge and blitz a little bit. He's not a very physical player, and his tackling is average. He doesn't hit hard. So like there's none of that thumper ability out of the back end from him, but he gets people to the ground for the most part. And you know what I think they're paying him for more than anything else is his ability to be rangy in the back half, play the football, make plays on the football. And I think he's pretty good at it, man. Like I really do. So I think that the fit of Thornhill, experience, athleticism, go back and look at his relative athletic score. I mean, he had a 44-inch vertical jump, a 4.4 40. He is an explosive athlete. He's multiple years away from that ACL tear he had after his rookie year. So he's on track. He's getting better. I'm excited about him. I mean, I know people in KC it's a different level of football. Like they're spoiled. I just think they're spoiled. So they think it's going to be easy to replace him with Brian Cook, who I liked Brian Cook coming out of Cincinnati, but I think that, again, for what they needed here, the positional flex of being able to play him single high, split high, or at times roll him down if they want to have some deceptive stuff here, because you don't want to have Grant Delpit be the only guy who can play down. That's a part of Joe Wood's defense I didn't love, is if the Browns are moving to safety, it was more often than not Grant Delpit, and that gave quarterbacks the ability to decipher a lot of things. The Browns will want to do, if they go single high or middle field close coverage, they'll want to be able to roll either Grant or Juan down and do some different things, and I think Juan can do all of those things. I think he's a great fit, and if he doesn't turn out to be as good as we hope, I still think the price point is so budget friendly that it still made a ton of sense for them. And like I said, you want to talk about John Johnson doing the opposite of what he's good at when he was in Cleveland, right? John is not a gifted runner. He's a 4.6 40 guy, and that showed in his ability to play deep coverage and cover ground. He's more of a downhill player, both in the post and pre-snap alignment stuff, and he'll maybe get. The ironic thing is John Johnson, for what he's probably going to get, which is pennies because he's still a free agent, would be the perfect third safety to have. But Thornhill is really good at the stuff that you needed Johnson to be good at, rangy, understands route concepts, development, and has a feel for jumping them, plays the catch point in football really well without having penalties thrown on him. I think I think it's a great fit, Quincy. I really do, man. And I hope he's only 27 and a half-ish right now. So he's still on the younger end of the prime of his career here. And I think he's the table set to be a nice contributor to this defense. Again, a guy, 2 times Super Bowl champion. I don't think he has a Pro Bowl. That he has Pro Bowl potential if he plays well in a defense that should be better. But again, he's not an elite guy, but he's just a couple little categories off from being an elite guy. And he's elite at what the Browns need, in my opinion, as he had the 3rd highest pass breakup percentage among all safeties last year. They need that element, and he brings that. So, again, a wealth of experience in big games that matter, and that stuff should all help, man.
Definitely. All right, so the last thing I want to ask you is there is a term called follow the money. And I think with NFL teams, that's the most important thing because they'll say anything in the press conference, but the money is where the money is. That's what's the most important part of it. What does this free agency, their moves, their aggression in certain areas tell you about what the Browns want to look different on this team from 2022?
Well, they want to be better at the things they struggled with defensively, right? So they want to be better in the deep portions of coverage over the middle of the field. They struggled with that. Thornhill attacks it. They want somebody who's a bit more consistent than what they got from Clowney, right? They both phases. And I think particularly the pass rush phase, they went out and got it. They know they have to fix their run defense. They've taken a step forward. They still need to do more. Tomlinson does that. They attacked everything they needed defensively, and they did 2 things on offense we really like, right? They got a secondary tight end's a bit more athletic, a bit more of a pass catcher, and then obviously this trade for Elijah Moore is everything I think that wide receiver room really needs. So they're aggressive. They're telling us they think they can win the Super Bowl this year, and they should. They have the quarterback. They have everything in place to go win a Super Bowl. They have literally the things that you need to do it are there. They can draft still, and they can sign some budget free agents to improve depth. Like everything is in the right place, and they're telling us we truly believe. And this is not just like they're not just doing it passively. They're now doing it proactively. If you notice, they changed the whole building the Browns to an unleashed title because they said they're done building. They're going after it right now. Like they're telling you publicly they think they're a Super Bowl contender. And there is a ton of talent here, and the goal should be Super Bowls. It should be Super Bowls. It should not be, maybe we'll sneak in the playoffs. Division titles and Super Bowls, and that's what they're chasing. And there is no excuse from any angle. Andrew Berry has said, you're not going to put an excuse on me. He's going out and attacking everything, and he's putting all the tools in place for Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone as they've done a nice job with that Mike Ford signing. And the linebacker's name, who is escaping me right now, is another great special teams player for Bubba when he was with the Colts. They're doing some things to help that unit too. So I really see them attacking some guys the coaches want, and B, filling the holes that were blatantly obvious. So I don't think as a Browns fan you should feel anything other than really good about where they're at right now. And they could still get aggressive if there is a guy they really want in the mid 40s to mid to early 50s. They could go up and get a second-round player by packaging a couple picks. They have 8 picks still in this draft. They didn't lose any pick in that Moore trade. They just slid back. So, they can still get aggressive, go up, and still have, you give up 74, 98 to go up to 48 to 52 area. You still have picks 111, 126, 120, 140, 142. So it's not like you're going from 98 to 111 is not that big a fall off. So they can use that pick to be aggressive to go get maybe an edge sitting there, or Ade Adebawore Adam in Northwestern is sitting there around 50. Like we need that. They could go get that guy if they wanted to.
Yeah, and I said this last year when I looked at the roster. I'll say it again this year. You don't want to look back as a Browns fan and think, man, if we had just been just a little bit more aggressive, right? Because I think the fan base that's feeling that right now is probably Baltimore, right? They look at that 2019 team and that 2020 team and they're like, man, if we had just been a little bit more aggressive and gotten that wide receiver here or gone after this player here, I feel like we would be in a better position than what they ended up being. The Browns are in an interesting position because they're talented enough that like this thing can kind of work out and they can get to the second round of playoffs very easily. I don't think that would be like a major accomplishment for this roster. But the goal here, I mean, like when you have as many marquee players as they do, the goal should be the Super Bowl, and it's not a unfeasible goal, right? We're not talking about Charlie Fry and Braylon Edwards taking this team to the Super Bowl. We're talking about something very different here. So that's interesting to be in this place. Of course, a lot of this hinges on Deshaun. He is the $230 million man. That's what the money's for, is the responsibility to be able to take this team to the next level. But they're certainly doing what they can to put him in position to be successful, which is what he did not have in Houston, at least on the field, and what they want him to have here in Cleveland. So that's just going to be something that's going to have to play itself out. We're going to be nervous until Deshaun has like 5 good games in a row. Like, that's just what it's going to be. Because we got to see it in our uniform. We got to see it. But thank you for previewing free agency with me, Jake. Make sure you check out Jake's stuff on the OBR. They also stream on Twitch, have the website, go to his Twitter. All of the links for him are up there. Jake, again, thank you for having, for coming on. And Jake does occasionally have me on his podcast as well. So make sure you listen to it. I like to listen to it. Everybody else, have a great day. Have a better night.